A little over a year ago, Russia began massive trips on the Ukrainian border. The Russian leaders simultaneously conducted military exercises with his neighbor in Belarus. A year ago, the Winter Olympics were held in Beijing. A few days after the end of the Olympics, Russia began to invade Ukraine for no. The effects of the Ukrainian war, which Russia started about a year ago, grew like an avalanche. The Ukrainian war caused hundreds of thousands of casualties. Both countries lost thousands of their soldiers and military ammunition. The war crossed the one-year limit on February the 24th, and the amount of Russian casualties will continue to increase rapidly. Ukraine's defense minister said a statement that 720 Russian soldiers died the previous day, bringing the total number of that Russian soldiers to about 131. The most important detail that attracted attention in the loss of soldiers of the Moscow army was the death of senior Russian commanders. The number of Russian generals killed reached double digits. After 44-year-old retired Major General Dmitriev was reported to have died in a conflict in the Donbass. According to information from some sources, we estimate that 20 of Putin's generals were killed in the Ukraine war, in addition to the senior commanders who lost their lives on the Ukrainian front lines. The Moscow army is also shaken by suspicious deaths. Makarov is the latest in a series of that. Deemed to be suicides among senior Russian security officials, including retired FSB, Major General and Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Major General Liko, as it is known, Putin, issued a decree last month to dismiss Major General World. However, the reason why the Russian leader did this remain. Former Russian Interior Minister Major General Ademako was found that after committing suicide in a suburb near Moscow, weeks after he was sick by President Putin. Russian state news agency Test reported while the Makarov's wife Valentina was at a country house with her husband in the village of Gokawa near Moscow. She heard a gunshot according to local. While some reports state that a Burka 2M shotgun was one near the body, there are reports claiming that there was a handgun nearby. According to reports, Mac's wife called an ambulance. However, paramedics could not say Makarov. And Makarov was declared that the deceased general's family was interrogated by the Russian investigative C. It is also reported that early in Makar's career, he worked at financial institutions in Moscow, including the Academy for Economic Security before moving to the Ministerial Internal Affairs Department for Combating Organized Crime, and the anti-extremism unit known as the Center. The Major General, allegedly involved in finding a suppressant, Putin's opponents, including all journalists who were hostile to the Kremlin. Makarov also took action against young people protesting Putin relatives, or Major General Villamaro told his Telegram channel that Makarov, who was reportedly sacked abruptly last month, fell into a deep repress. Relatives or the Major General also stated that Makarov didn't know how to continue his career after a lifetime of military service. On the other hand, Makarov is not the first of the suspicious that since the beginning of 2022, several top Russians and magnates have died under mystery circumstances in recent months. In November, Colonel Wadin Boko 44, vice president of the Makpak Higher Nav School in the latter wartop, was found that from multiple gunshot wounds in what has been described as a suicide. According to his, Boko, who played a role in Putin's partial mobilization effort, executed himself by shooting 5 shots in the chest in the commander's office, after allegedly preparing to take the blame for some of the problems that plagued the invasion of Ukraine. In December, Sausage King Pale Anto, who criticized the invasion of Ukraine, died after falling from a luxury hotel in India. 3 days after his friend died on the same trip, Anto had criticized Russia's attack on Kai as terrorism. Russian energy manager Ian Pak 39 died in September after falling into the sea by sailing of the Kosto-Roski Island in the Sea of Japan. On September 1, 67-year-old Ra Magno vice president, or Russian oil company, Lukoil, died suspiciously after falling from the window of a hospital in Moss. American businessman and famous Putin critic, Koy Report was reported to have died in August by jumping out of the window of his Washington apartment as a prominent Putin critic. He had his phone, car keys, nearly $3,000 in cash, and a Florida driver's license in his hand when he, in July, Major General 76, retired from the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, was found that in Moscow in July. His death was also considered suicide. Other recent deaths have included the editor of a popular Russian propaganda magazine, the vice president of Guru Bank, and a senior Gazprom. The suspicious thoughts of important Russians were not limited to Russia's borders either. In April, former vice president on No Attack was found hanging from a railing with his wife and daughters. Tap the death of B. We talk about a series of suspicious that since 2022 of. It does not go on that the suspicious that have a common point that the C are senior Russians and have ties to Russian leader. How credible it is to describe the Daso Russians who have deep ties to Vladimir Putin as a suicide is something that needs to be discussed. Now let's talk about the losses that Russia suffered on the Ukrainian front lines. Ukraine eliminated more than 5,000 Russian soldiers after killing, wounding, or capturing them during a Russian investigation. Ukraine's defense capabilities at Walar, according to a Ukrainian official. Edar has witnessed intense fighting in recent weeks as Russian troops try to seize the town. The peak and tactical failures reported by Russian forces around Wall-Ledar Don's oblasts likely further vacant the Russians. Ultranationalist communities believe that Russian forces could launch a decisive offensive operation. These casualty figures came after a vigorous counter-offensive effort by Ukraine in the fall led troops to regain control of Kherson and progress told on both sides. Much of the conflict shifted to Bakhmut. Any offensive is expected in the spring with rumor of fresher recruiting as many as 500,000 troops from a new mobile. However, according to Toki, head of the Combined Press Center or Taki district of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, Ukraine responded with force to the Russian investigation at the end of January. It's allegedly led to the deaths of thousands of Russian soldiers, including the Brigades command staff. Draki announced that Russia lost 130 pieces of equipment, 36 of which were tanked in the attack on Ukraine. So why did the Russian troops want Wall-Ledar? The town on Wada is vital for cotton supply lines to Ukrainian troops. It also focused Russia's troops on WLA, as it was at the center of Russia's takeover of the Donets region. Russia began examining Ukraine's defense of the town late last month to identify Ukraine's fitnesses in the region. But Ukraine maintains a strong defense that has crippled some of Russia's. Russia's failed attempt to take over Vlada in January has sparked further criticism of the Kremlin military capabilities by Russia. Military, blog, or Milo, something that Russia will not be able to successfully attack the entire Donets region. In short, the unsuccessful attack attempts of the Moscow military unit to motivate both Russian civilians and Russian soldiers about the. In addition, the lurid utterance of suicides rhetoric about senior commanders of the Russian army destroys trust in Vladimir Putin. It is a matter of curiosity how successful the Russian army can be in an environment where there is no moderation and trust. Next news. In recent days, Russian forces launched several attacks in eastern Ukraine, pushing for a breakthrough on the battlefield before the delivery of new Western weapons. The Russians sought to regain the initiative on the battlefield after a series of bitter setbacks last year, but the lack of necessary ammunition and mobile units undermines the possibility of Moscow military units launching a major offensive. For example, Russian forces have managed to seize only a few hundred meters a week since they attempted to resume offensive operations last month to seize the remaining Ukrainian parts of the Esk region. Moscow has yet to achieve the goals of its campaign, including full control over the industrial Dobr region in eastern Ukraine. The current focus of Russia is the small city of BMO in Donetsk, one of the two regions that make up the Doba, the industrial center of Ukraine, which is now partially occupied by Russia in battles led by the Wagner Group and inflated by prison soldiers. Russia has been trying to besiege Bakhmut for months. Most of its pre-war population, 70,000, left, leaving Ukrainian soldiers dug up. The capture of Bakhmut would give Russia a stepping stone to advance further west into the two major cities of Esker against Slow. But Ukraine and its allies say it'll be a theory victory given that it took months to capture Bamo, and Russia's huge loss. Also, Wagner head the Afghani Prigozhin predicts that UND will fall by April depending on how many men Ukraine has thrown into the war, and how well supplied their men are. As you can see, there are heartbreaking points on the eastern front line. The fierce struggle of control of Bakhmut and Esk, one of the 4 Ukrainian regions put in claim to have annexed to Russia last, has remained to focus on Russia-Ukraine war since autumn, while the pulse of the struggle in the east of Ukraine is still beating at high speed. The northeast of Ukraine is also moving. Especially in the last days, there are very active movements in the city of Sami and Kaki. We often hear the name of the S-300, a defense systems in these regions. Russian invaders fired 7 S-300 missiles late last day from the Belgorod region, targeting the Kyiv region of Ukraine. 3 explosions occurred in the Kyiv, Osnos, and Kiev regions of the missile attacks that took place around 11 p.m. according to the statements made by the head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration. We learned that Russian S-300 missiles did not cause any damage, and the Russian invading troops could not hit to targets. We have mentioned about that we have heard about attacks carried out by the Russian S-300 missiles in recent days. In addition to the Kaki region, there have been quite important movements in the city of Sami recently. A raid siren sounded in some region the other day as the old guest. The reason for the sounding of the air sirens is the midsize of the Russian invading troops. Moscow forces has been carrying out attack attempts targeting the Ukrainian civilian infrastructure since the first days of the war. Russian military units, which did not change their tactics much during the war, again targeted Ukrainian civilian. The Ukrainian armed forces gave the necessary response sharply to the Moscow army, which was trying to launch the S-300 missiles in the Semi region. Its joint work with the Ukrainian Air Force and artillery units destroyed to Russian S-300 missile system. The Russian S-300 air defense system is one of the most effective air defense systems of the Russian army. The Russian army, which was trying to achieve a significant success on the eastern front line, was shot in the heart of. The cost of Russia's S-300 air defense system is exactly $115 million, not only in terms of financing, but also in the field of air dominance. Russia has lost a lot of credibility with these attacks. This was not the first Russian S-300 air defense system destroyed by Ukraine, and it's probably won't be the. Nearly a dozen Russian S-300 air defense systems and at least one S-400 air defense system were destroyed in the past month. The Ukrainian Armed Forces explains that 3 S-400 seconds have been destroyed. But so far, one Russian S-400 air defense complex has been destroyed by visuals and geographical locations. August and October were a nightmare for the S-300 and S-400 Russian air defense. With the integration of American-made GM-88 anti-radiation missiles into Ukrainian fighter jets, the air defense capability of the Russian army has been seriously reduced. Ukrainian fighter jets hunted down billions of dollars worth of Russian air defense systems, one by one, and with this S-300, possibly 11 Russian S-300 air defense systems were destroyed. The fashion of the S-300 seconds is gone, but on paper, the Russian army has the best arsenal against air. One of the batteries of multilayer surface-to-air missiles capable of detecting and destroying the best-known systems aircraft, and ballistics is the S-300. This AOR defense system fires cruise missiles at a distance of more than 300 kilometers and can reach a very high altitude. The neutralization of the Russian S-300 seconds was one of the important factors. The neutralization of the Russian S-300 seconds by the Ukrainian was one of the important factors affecting the course of the war. Russian leader Vladimir Putin doesn't care if the Russian S-300 air defense system is devalued. In addition to a series of failures on the front lines, Vladimir Putin continues to lose credibility, which has and missiles, which he trusts very much, but still, Mr. Putin showers Ukrainian cities with missiles, a mix of the old school and the new Moscow sent balloons before punching Ukraine with high-tech weapons. Moscow launched a new missile bombardment of cities in Ukraine before dawn the other day, killing a 7 to 9-year-old woman and targeting critical infrastructure once. Opening ground-sea and air fire, Russian forces launched about 3 dozen cruise missiles late by the Ukrainian air, as well as redesigned missiles designed to attack war, disabled power stations, and overturn industrial complexes as the first anniversary of the invasion approached. The final chapter of the Ukrainian war has been characterized a bizarre combination of old-fashioned vehicles and high-tech weapons. Shortly before the missiles arrived, the Ukrainian skies were partially filled with balloons intended to confuse Ukrainian air defense. The use of balloons in war has a long history for Moscow, but it has only been seen over Ukraine in recent weeks. Chesky, a Ukrainian defense analyst, said that one reason they are now making a comeback may be that Ukraine has taken steps to counter the threat posed by Russia's use of Iranian-made drones. The attack came a day before dozens of officials from Western countries, including Vice President Kamala Harris and Foreign Minister Anton Blinken, arrived in Munich for a 3-day annual security conference. Ukraine's allies were expected to show unity and determination days before the anniversary of the amazing. On the other hand, the Munich Security Conference alleged to resolutely continue their support for Kiev. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that about half of the missiles launched by Russia violated Ukraine's missile massage defense system. For this reason, Zelensky reiterated once again that arms delivers. Ukraine has lobbied heavily to raise Western military aid to a higher level and back toward warplanes. French President, Macron, and German Chancellor, all of show gave speech swearing dead. The West will not lose patience, even as debates rage about scale, cost, and economic damage of the war effort around the. In recent months, American and European officials have showed that they are united against Russia, which has challenged many predictions of internal conflict and surrender, including in Moscow. But the war is expected to last at least another year, and that unity will be tested. Few on either side are expecting a breakthrough, and the cost of continuing the Ukrainian war against a larger enemy is expected to create new tensions between the allies. In summary, the sooner Mr. Putin realizes that he cannot achieve his imperialist goal, the better the chances that the war will end soon with the withdrawal of Russia's occupying forces. Other news: a handful of days remain until the beginning of the first year of the war between Russia and the level of violence in the conflict zones has consequently increased as a result of this. The Russian army, which is composed of soldiers with little combat experience, is attempting to attack units of the Ukrainian army. But the invading troops continue to be surprised while they are on their way to attack, mainly due to the fact that the Ukrainian army's air defense systems are continuously being. Over the course of the past few days, a spectacular operation conducted by the Ukrainian army has targeted 2 regions in person that are controlled by the Russian invaders. In addition to that, there were military bases and storage facilities for ammunition located in these regions. According to some estimates, the Russian invaders suffered significant casualties as a direct result of this. Let's take a look at the successful operations that have been going on in Kherson, as well as the developments that have been taking place in the war zone. First, before we give you a report on what transpired during the war, we want to bring something to your attention as a TP News. We will continue to keep you up to date on all new information regarding the conflict in Russia and Ukraine on a daily basis. Our team is made up of individuals who are well versed in their respective fields. By clicking the Super Thanks button on this page, you will be able to show your support for our team, which monitors developments in conflict zones and the political arena on your behalf. An unexpected assault was launched against the Russian invaders in the Kherson region, which includes the cities of Ts and Chaplin. The Ukrainian army's reconnaissance groups and air force were responsible for the destruction of one of the Russian invaders' most significant bases and ammunition depots. Before beginning the operation, the Ukrainian army did significant preparation work in two of the towns located in the Kherson region. After all of this work was done, the only thing that was left to do was launch the missile. As soon as they had occupied Kherson, the Russian army began using a large building in the town of Chaplin, also known as in this region as a military base. This was done almost immediately. In addition to housing a large number of soldiers, the sprawling military installation also functioned as a storage facility for them. The Russian occupiers of Chaplin Sky believed that Ukrainian troops would not be able to discover their base due to its proximity to the Crimean Peninsula and its distance from active combat zones. However, Crimea has always been the focus of the Ukrainian army's attention. As a result, the Russian occupiers' bases and ammunition depots in the region were well known to the Ukrainian army. The assault was inevitable. It was just a question of when it would happen. It was just recently reported that two unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs belonging to the Ukrainian army, were brought down on the Crimean Peninsula near Seva. An explosion occurred at the Russian military base in Chokolaka, somewhere between 1 and 2 days after this announcement was made. What connection does the Russian military outpost in Chaplin, Alaska? After the drones that were shot down in earlier reports, we stated that the shooting down of Ukrainian drones in the skies over the Crimean Peninsula was a success for Ukraine, not. This interpretation was validated by the attack that took place the other day because the downed drones were tasked with using their knowledge of the occupiers' deployment areas. The Ukrainian army had received the coordinates of this military base in the city of Chokolaka from the drones before the Russian invaders shot them down. The base was located in the city of Chokolaka. The only thing left to do was launch the missile defense. HAMS missile systems were used by the Ukrainian army to attack the Russian military installation that had been located by the reconnaissance drones. The Russian base contained an ammunition depot, which contributed to the increased intensity of the explosions. The sounds of explosions could be heard in the background as the flames rose into the air. The sky was overcast with gray clouds. The number of Russian soldiers who lost their lives as a direct result of this attack is unknown, but it is clear that the Russian occupiers suffered significant casualties. Another ammunition depot belonging to the Russian occupiers in the Khan region was destroyed in the explosion, putting the occupiers in danger. The ammunition depot and the haven of risk that is located close to the Dnieper River have been a target of the Ukrainian army for some. This is due to the fact that the Ukrainian army has installed missile defense systems in many of the areas that bordered the Dnieper River. The strategic significance of the Dnieper River was the driving factor behind this decision. This river can be found flowing through both Russian territory and Ukrainian territory. As a result, it is an extremely important factor in the war due to the fact that the Ukrainian army was aware of. They kept a close eye on everything that was going on along the river banks. This careful monitoring led to the destruction of the ammunition storage, FFA facilities in Trez, which were located nearby. The ammunition depot was the target of missile attacks from the Ukrainian Air Force, which led to its destruction via violent explosion. It is estimated that 2 Russian ammunition depots in the Khan region were responsible for the loss of hundreds of thousands of tons of ammunition. These ammunition depots were destroyed along with their losses in ammunition. The Russian army is suffering from a significant loss of military personnel. The day before yesterday, a Ukrainian social media account reported that an operation that had been carried out by the 110th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army had been successful during this operation, which was filmed with a drone camera. It can be seen very clearly that the Russian occupants of the territory are blown up one by one. The Russian armed forces are still being hunted by Ukrainian drone. The first few minutes of the video are dedicated to footage of Russian invaders fighting in the trenches. In the very first few seconds of the video, a Ukrainian drone is seen dropping a bomb directly on top of Russian troops who have invaded Ukrainian territory. Roughly 10 Russian soldiers were attempting to escape the trench as quickly as possible, but they were unaware of what was going. While some Russian soldiers are killed in the trench and others try to escape to the surrounding area, Ukrainian drones are meticulously following the Russian soldiers' every move. A bomb that was dropped from an unmanned aerial vehicle operated by the Ukrainians took the lives of Russian soldiers who were running in rapid succession as a result of the bombs that were dropped from the sky. The number of soldiers, who had between 5 and 6 at the beginning of the escape from the trench, has been reduced by 1 soldier at a time. The Ukrainian Air Force is having a good time picking off the Russian soldiers who are entrenched in the trench on Marseille one at a time, rather than blowing them up as the Russian army prepares for a major offensive in the first year of the conflict. Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, is getting dangerously low on troops in him. In addition to this, the soldiers in the army do not get along very well with one another. It is common knowledge that the Wagner Group, the Chechens, led by Kadyrov and the Russian army, are in a constant state of conflict with one another. The disagreement that exists between Yevgeny Pan, the owner of the Wagner Group company, and Vladimir Putin, has been at the forefront of discussion in recent days. In part, but fresh imagery reveals that the argument has reached the front lines of the battle. The other day, members of the Wagner Group took to their YouTube channel to share an extremely powerful video. It can be seen in the video that was made public that members of the Wagner Group fired their weapons at paintings that depict Russian generals off, and, while lying on the ground, one of the nice soldiers fires shots at the target area. It is not entirely clear what the objective was when the video first starts playing at the very end of the scene. However, it is very clear that the soldiers are standing up and walking towards the target in order to hang the portraits of Gary's Mod and Leip on a pallet. This occurs right before the final. Even this brief video is sufficient to demonstrate the magnitude of the challenges faced by the Russian armed forces. Despite the fact that both groups are working toward invading Ukraine, it appears that they will soon come into conflict with one another. The Chechen troops that are loyal to Kadyrov are an additional group that is fighting alongside the Russian. Kadyrov made a statement that will make the situation even more difficult for those serving on the front lines. While Russian soldiers of the Wagner Group and the Russian army are already degrading Chechens because of their race, Kadyrov made the announcement that he planned to found a private military company similar to the Wagner Group. As each day passes, the Russian army continues to lose, which has led to an increase in the number of disagreements both within the army and between the army and politics. The success of the Ukrainian can be seen through all of these developments. For me, it appears that the number of casualties suffered by the army will continue to rise in the coming days of the conflict as political tensions and disagreements within the army. Putin's determination to invade Ukraine may come to an end at any moment due to the fact that he's running out of power as he deals with an endless stream of problems. What kind of ideas do you have? Will Putin be able to solve his problems? What measures will Russia take to make up for the loss of soldiers and ammunition? What are your thoughts on the successful offensive that was carried out by the Ukrainian army? We are interested in hearing your point of. Keep up with us here for further updates. The App News YouTube channel is the owner of any and all rights to these videos. Every authoritarian leader lives in constant worry that they will be killed in office. It is common knowledge that Putin has been acting extremely panicked about that topic as of late because of his anxiety. Putin is making some very peculiar choices, right? The Russian press is now claiming that Vladimir Putin is acting in a manner consistent with the paranoid. It is so obvious that Putin fears the war will take a certain turn. We provide responses to these questions as well as a TP News. First things first, let's talk about the things that have Putin so worried. You are aware that the political system in Russia is not to. As a result, it is extremely challenging to effect political change in Russia. Putin is applying a significant amount of pressure to those who oppose him according to the findings of a large number of non-governmental organizations. Vladimir Putin also meddles in election processes. The result is that those who oppose Putin are becoming more extreme as a result of. There is a widespread misconception in Russia that there will be no transition in power until Putin passes away, but this is not the case. Alexei Navalny, one of the most prominent opposition leaders in Russia, is working to unseat Vladimir Putin through democratic means. Those who disagree with this assessment hope to achieve this goal. The people of Russia provided Navalny with a significant amount of. This makes Putin very nervous, but not before a very brief period of time had passed. Navalny was poisoned. The anger felt by the Russian people was palpable. Following the poisoning of Navalny, this event marked a turning point for Russia. Following that, Vladimir Putin made the decision to increase the number of bodyguards. There were more and more rumors circulating that Putin had been. Putin's level of fear increased significantly, particularly after the invasion of Ukraine. It is common knowledge that Putin's level of anxiety rose even further because he was so worried about being killed. Vladimir Putin started engaging in some very interesting behavior to begin. Putin started making significant and frequent adjustments to his program. His press conferences were repeatedly rescheduled due to scheduling conflicts. Putin has also completely cut off all of his interactions with the general public. He made the decision to remain inside the Kremlin palace the entire time. This palace is where he conducts all of his gatherings. In addition, Putin has increased the number of people who act as stunt double. It is estimated that Vladimir Putin currently possesses more than 40 SS instead of Vladimir Putin. These individuals take part in a variety of programs. In point of fact, Putin is not the only politician who employs the services of stunt doubles. However, the number of Putin's doubles is extremely high during his travels. Pushing also makes use of these. When Vladimir Putin travels by road, he is accompanied by a very long convoy of vehicles. Within these convoys, Putin's double agents are also seen getting into separate vehicles. It is impossible to tell from this angle which vehicle Vladimir Putin is traveling in. An explosion took place in September of last year as Vladimir Putin's convoy was making its way towards the Kremlin palace. An explosion took place in the right front tire of Vladimir Putin's vehicle. The explosion took the life of the driver, but the person who was in the car at the time was a stunt double for Vladimir Putin. Putin was able to avoid serious injury thanks to this strategy, but the explosion itself served to heighten the Russian leader's sense of dread. A number of allegations pertaining to the topic can be found in which is based on the claims made by a confidential confessor working in the Kremlin. Allegations suggest that Vladimir Putin has trouble falling or staying asleep due to the fact that I am afraid. Putin meets with the head of his intelligence service once a week during which he receives information about the people who protect him. In addition, the protocols for maintaining safety within the Kremlin palace have been. Everyone who enters the palace is subjected to a search. Even Russian commanders and ministers are required to go through the search process. The commanders are required to put their weapons away before entering the palace because Putin does not trust anyone else. Visitors will be accompanied by security personnel upon entering. The officials in Russia are fed up with these security procedures because they have seen Putin's fear, and they have witnessed it themselves. Officials in Russia believe that Putin suffers from paranoia. The allegations that Putin suffers from paranoia have gained even more traction in the wake of his most recent decision. Up until this point, Putin has traveled to all of his destinations using a private air. Nevertheless, in accordance with the regulations that govern aviation, these flights are required to be reported to the Russian Air Force. Sharing this information helps to regulate international air traffic, and Putin was understandably concerned about the situation. Putin made the decision to experiment with an intriguing strategy. In order to take covert trips, steel armor was placed on a massive train that traveled through. Putin travels to all of his destinations in the world using this armored train. The statement was made by Ms. Olsen, who had previously served as the Minister of Education for Ukraine. According to social reports, she claimed that Putin's travel arrangements reveal something about his mental state. To put it another way, his standard operating procedure is a little bit. In addition to this, he is most likely engaged in an extremely protective trait and avoids going out in public with extreme caution. It by no means indicates that he has a sense of security. Russia is another country where people are talking a lot about this issue. Ilya Rosvan, a journalist, stated that since the beginning of the war, Vladimir Putin had largely stopped using the presidential. Vansky made this statement. Everyone is shocked to learn that Putin, who portrays himself all over the world as an extremely courageous and fearless leader, actually has a great deal of fear. The manner in which this news was reported by the Russian press is another factor that is very detrimental to Putin's reputation. Putin portrays himself consistently as a courageous figure and Russia's leader. Putin, who places a high value on propaganda, is fuming about reports that he's scared because they undermine his reputation. It is common knowledge that Putin is attempting to suppress news regarding the issue, but Putin can no longer control social media. The people of Russia are unafraid of Putin and continue to spread real news, particularly as a result of the news that is spread on Telegram. Every one of Putin's secrets is about to be revealed. Right now, Vladimir Putin is facing the most challenging times of his entire political career because of the threat of assassination. His reputation is tarnishing more and more with each passing day. In order for Putin to continue receiving protection from the state, he must remain in. If Vladimir Putin were to step down as president, it is highly unlikely that he would face criminal charges and time behind bars as a means of preserving his own safety. Vladimir Putin is determined to maintain his position as president at any cost. On the other hand, public approval of Putin in Russia is falling with each passing day according to recent polls conducted in. The percentage of the population that endorses Vladimir Putin's policies has dropped below 30%. Putin has provoked a significant amount of ire among the Russian population. Putin is becoming increasingly desperate as a result of this situation. A psychological crisis is being experienced by Portes as a result of his extreme helplessness. And we have already mentioned that Putin is suffering from insomnia and is paranoid about a variety of things. Medical professionals agree that this has the potential to alter the overall direction of the conflict. So how does something like this come about as a consequence of having trouble sleeping for an extended period of time, having nightmares and experiencing high levels of fear? Putin might behave more impulsive. These health issues have the potential to impact Putin's memory, as well as a consequence of a lot of people have problems with their memories, prolonged sleep problems. They have trouble remembering decisions that they made even a few days ago, and they frequently experience a feeling of déjà vu. The fact that Putin, who must make crucial decisions on a daily basis, is struggling with this issue presents a significant challenge for Russia. On the other hand, the fact that Putin suffered from health issues has been public knowledge for a considerable amount of time. According to the doctors, Putin required rest in addition to treatment for the other protest. The current problems may be the cause of other diseases, particularly those that progress more rapidly during these processes, such as Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. It was common knowledge that Putin suffered from Parkinson's disease and that the disease caused him to move his hands in an uncontrollable manner. The likelihood of Putin's disease worsening, in the opinion of his medical team, increases with each passing day, a day without flaw. Because of his anxiety, Putin is working on developing his own version of Ant. What are your thoughts on Vladimir Putin's concerns? What impact, if any, do you think Putin's paranoia is having on the way the war is progressing? What are your thoughts on the increased security measures that Putin has implemented? Your thoughts on Putin's use of warmer trends would be appreciated. Do you believe that Vladimir Putin will be murdered? Please enlighten us with your thoughts. Keep up with us here for further updates. Iran also became involved in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. When the hot war continued, the DNA announcement that Iran has entered the war, a very big move, came from Israel. This announcement was followed by a series of bombshell allegations, one after another in detail. In recent days, the pace of the Russia-Ukraine war has begun to pick up, despite the fact that the conflict has already been going on for quite some time. It arrived at the front door from the key of the front. The assertion states that Iran has taken an official stance on the side of Russia. In the ongoing war, Russia has begun to move on Ukraine with the support of Iran, a country with which it has been allied for a long time. Iran has been a close ally of Russia. The involvement of Iran in the conflict brought up the prospect of a third global conflict for a second time. The administration of Russia, which has been perturbed for a significant amount of time by the support that has been given to Ukraine, has stated that the West has provided Ukraine with 42.2 billion of aid respect. Confirming the statements of a former oligarch is the fact that almost half of this aid has been provided by the United States. So far, this aid has been provided by the United States. How did Iran get involved in the war, and what action did Israel take in response? Due to the coverage that this topic has received in the media, it is now common knowledge all over the globe that Russia is currently dealing with a severe shortage of soldiers. But the answer that he came up with to this problem caused quite a stir all over the world. In recent conversations that have been deciphered, information has been obtained that Iran delivered exactly 1,000 kamikaze unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to Russia. Immediately after the bombshell claim was made, there was some misinformation. This assertion was founded on the notion that Ukraine supplied Russia with the pilots who would fly these kamikaze drones. The pilots of the unmanned aerial vehicles, drones that are directing operations in Crimea and within the borders of Ukraine, are receiving training from Iran, which is providing the training. And immediately after this, a statement came out of Washington with a bombshell saying that the United States has made a statement saying that Russia is targeting civilian infrastructure. The Iranians' use of drones over the course of many years demonstrated the magnitude of their defeat. That information was provided by Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, who serves as a spokesperson for the United States Department of Defense. These are merely aspects of psychological warfare, and Putin is continuing to lose ground and is ultimately going to be defeated. However, almost immediately after Patrick Ryder's remarks, his comments about Iran caused a huge resonance in the press all over the world. According to Patrick, we continue to observe Iran's complicity in the export of terrorism, not only in the Middle East, but also as we can see today else. It is also very important that the United States immediately followed this up by saying that drones are being used as a way to gain a psychological edge on the ground, but that this does not change the fact that Russia is losing ground. This statement was made within a few minutes of the first one. Analysts from the V faction believe that this war has begun to lay the groundwork for a very significant. It is intriguing to speculate about what the outcome of this war will be, given that the opposing parties are gradually edging closer together after learning what Iran had done. Israel took a very severe action. Israel and Iran have been at each other's throats for a very long time due to their long-standing animosity toward one another. The question of which nation in the Middle East will ultimately emerge as the most powerful is at the heart of this rivalry. It is possible to demonstrate with data that Israel is in the lead in this regard. However, and with this most recent move, it has demonstrated once more that it is significantly more powerful than Iran. Israel has begun a vigorous assault on those responsible for these events. One of these assaults was directed at one of Iran's headquarters for military research, and it was success. Iran's statements in response to the attack that were related to their nuclear program surprised the rest of the world, while the Israeli leadership chose to remain silent. When it became apparent that Iran was openly supporting Russia, Israel took the initiative to send the Iron Dome to Ukraine to defend that country. These weapons, which were given the go-ahead by Benjamin Netanyahu, are regarded as having a high level of destructive potential. The 3 different file systems in the not-too-distant future. Israel will begin supplying Ukraine with these weapons if a compromise can be reached between the two countries. Any raw statement issued in the wake of these attacks made reference to the nuclear issue in the following way. These kinds of actions are not capable of changing the resolve and intention of other nuclear experts working toward peaceful progress. The possibly peaceful stance that Iran is taking has been criticized as hypocritical in many parts of the. Iran has recently reached a point where it is so incapable of protecting even the Consul General of Azerbaijan, despite the fact that it is common knowledge among the media that Iran has supported a large number of terrorist organizations. From the very beginning, we have high hopes that Iran will be reminded by this predicament, that it too ought to look for peaceful resolutions to the conflict in. The discovery of Iran's massive shipment to Russia led to a significant escalation in tensions between the two countries. Iran claims that these drones were ordered a long time before the war, but Iran's own words contradict each other as to when the drones, which had not yet been used in any war, proved themselves and began to be sold abroad. Iran says that the drones were ordered a long time before the. Iran insists that it has never taken a side in this dispute and that it has always been impartial, despite the fact that it has a long history of covertly supporting Russia in this matter. It should be emphasized that Russia is a partner in this evil against Ukraine and many of these war crimes, particularly in the case of unmanned aerial drones, because it is also known that Russia is still trying to resist and positions within the framework of the. Considering that Russia is still trying to resist and positions within the framework of the support, the directors came out on top when pitted against this new technology, which resulted in a significant victory for the directors. It was during the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that it became abundantly clear how beneficial drones can be because of this. The Russian military was aware of the situation and made the decision to take. It can be deduced from this that the transaction in question took place sometime after the war. This issue will be resolved with embargoes that are significantly more severe tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, despite Iran's protests to the contrary. Before these facts came to light, a spokeswoman for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs named Maria Zakharova stated that the U.S. accusation that Russia violated the embargo on arms supplies from Iran imposed by the United Nations Security Council is not objective. In light of everything that has transpired, one is compelled to seriously ponder what other dastardly schemes Russia has. Davis. The West is playing a very active role in the war, but Russia's rhetoric is being ignored, which is another complaint coming from Russia at this juncture.